garden friends, welcome on back to Flower Patch. Today we are going to talk about clematis and my tips and tricks for growing it. There is no one size fits all in gardening, so these are the things that work for me. And I've grown clematis for 27 years, thereabouts. And so I've lost a few. I've several that are doing wonderfully, and I'll just tell you what I do to get them to grow. So let's get rolling on how to grow clematis, Pam's way. Now at the end, stay to the end, and I will share with you my 5 favorite clematis that just bloom and perform beautifully for me with virtually little effort on my part. Yes, I'm going to clear one thing up here. I do know that clematis is pronounced several different ways. Even on one garden show that I watched, there were like 4 or 5 different pronunciations from the presenters. There was clematis, 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 and yeah, clematis. I mean, it just went on and on. So there's no one right way. Just go with clematis here today. So well, that's out of the way. Because I knew I'd get somebody correcting me in my pronunciation of it because they pronounce it different. And just like anything else in gardening, there's no one way. So if you know what I'm talking about, then it's good enough for me. So let's go back. Growing clematis. This is like one of the most popular vines there is. And it could be because it's relatively easy to grow. There is a caveat with that. I have learned there are tougher ones than others. And some are more susceptible to a fungal infection, which we'll get onto the different ones or the different one later on in this discussion. But yeah, so don't give up if you've lost 1 or 2, because know that it's worth it to find a one that will grow for you well, because they're just gorgeous and they're just really easy once they get going. So that needed to be said. Now, as far as the winter time, you do need cold winter temperatures for a period of time to get good growth and bloom with clematis. So I found that information and I wanted to make sure I read it to you. So clematis have some specific climate-related requirements. Clematis grow and bloom much better if they have a dormant period of approximately 6 weeks. Nighttime temperatures of about 45 or colder for a week or more seems to put them into dormancy. So most of the really good books on growing clematis are written in the UK, and those conditions are different than ours. But you can get some really good information on Brushwood Nursery's website. They have, with each clematis, they have the growing zones and what bloom time you can expect from them. Some will say spring blooming, some will say spring, summer, fall blooming, some will say spring through fall blooming. And that'll tell you what to expect from them because they all differ in a ways. And so then you'll be aware when you can expect blooms. Okay, variety of types. There's a wide range of species and forms. You know, there's bushy, dwarf, tall, and vining types. There's the ones that stay shorter. They actually could be a really pretty ground cover, and they grow well on the ground. One I saw that I have on my wish list is called Sapphire Indigo, but there's several others too. I was thinking under my roses in the rose cottage garden, which I just planted a whole bunch over there. I'm going to share that video on another day. And then, yeah, I was thinking over there. But if you go to Brushwood Nursery's website, they have, is it an advanced tab or something? Anyways, you can pick non-vining types of clematis, and you can see the varieties they have there, as well as all the other ones. Some are short growing, some are taller growing. And short growing, I mean vining up. I have one called Bourbon, and it only gets 4 feet tall. And then I have Pearl de Jour or Warsaw Nike, and they'll get 12 feet tall. So there's just a wide array. Okay, so bloom sizes and shapes, yes. The star-shaped ones, they could be smaller sizes, they can be big. I have some of each, and yeah, it's just really neat. And some of the star-shaped ones can be double. And I've had a couple of doubles. I have Belle of Walking or Woking, however that's pronounced. And then I used to have Francisca Maria, which was a beautiful purple one. And the Belle of Walking, if I keep it deadheaded, it will bloom all summer long once it starts blooming. Last year I had to cut it back hard in midsummer because I had some dieback because the irrigation to it got plugged, and so it wasn't getting water, and all of a sudden it was dying, and I didn't know why. Found that that was the problem, cut it off, and it regrew from the roots, and it's starting to bloom now. So that's how tough some of them can be. The Francisca Maria was also that tough and bloomed throughout the summer. It just died only because when I was moving things along the porch where it's planted, yeah, somehow it got dug up, covered something that hurt it, and it was all my fault. It wasn't because it wasn't a tough grower, it was just got damaged. Okay, I think I covered that. Oh, the double blooms. Now, one thing I want to say about double blooms is that the first year, the first bloom will be single, and then subsequent blooms will be the double flowers. I don't know why that is, but at first I thought, oh no, I have one that's not a double when I thought I planted a double. And come to find out, when I read up on it, it's just that the next bloom was fully double and just gorgeous. There is one that I want to get, and it's a tough one, and it's called Josephine, and that's a real pretty pink, and that's a very reliable one too, and it's a double. My grandmother's name was Josephine. So, color spectrum, point number 3. Now, there are a wide variety of colors. Blues, pinks, purples, whites, creamy color. My Belle of Walking is like a creamy color, kind of leans toward lavender, depends on the temperatures and the time of year. So that can change, but that's the general range. Reds, did I say reds? I'm not sure. Anyways, but I just discovered a yellow one. I didn't think there was a yellow one, and then when I looked it up, I found, of course, Brushwood Nurseries has a yellow one, and it's kind of cool looking. So I don't know if I'll get that. There's so many on my list that I'd have to get a bunch of money to be able to just to buy all the ones I want. So I have to be choosy. Plus, where am I going to put them all, right? I keep running out of space. Anyways, just know there's a wide range of colors, and you could probably find one to fit in your garden somewhere. Point number 4. Many of you realize that there are the pruning groups. Some call it A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3. Pruning type A or 1 is these Clematis bloom on old wood. So you don't want to prune them back hard like you would the 2 or 3s. And you basically just deadhead them, or you could just leave them alone for them to bloom. If you wanted to prune it back to keep it in check, because some of them are pretty rampant, then do so. But you can do it in increments, and therefore you wouldn't lose all your blooms. But just know that it won't bloom again until the following year on those canes. So type 2 pruning. Now this is where I differ from some people. Let me see, how can I explain this well? Okay, I let my clematis bloom, and it blooms in late spring, early summer. It'll bloom for a couple weeks. Then I cut it back hard, like down to 12 inches. And then it reflushes new growth, and it reblooms. It'll be not as great as the first bloom, but it reblooms beautifully, and you just get to enjoy those flowers again. And then I leave it in the fall, because like mine just finished blooming. This is November, the first week of November, the ones that I pruned back in summer. And my Belle of Walking is another one that I pruned back in summer, and it's blooming. Then I won't prune in the fall. I'll just let it be. I might deadhead it, but sometimes I leave the seed heads because they capture moisture, and then it freezes and they sparkle, and it's just really pretty and interesting. But I leave them through winter. I do not do a late winter, early spring prune with my type 2 pruning. I just let them be, and that way I get a much bigger, fuller bloom, because type 2 clematis blooms on old wood and new wood. And that's why I get such a tremendous bloom in the early summer. You may get it sooner depending on when your temperatures come up. Now, it does not depend on your zone. I'm a zone 8B, and you would think I would get blooms sooner, but no, we get very cold springs, and it doesn't start warming up till nearly June. And so that's why I don't get my bloom until then. And there's people that live in zone 7, zone 6, who they have a spring sooner. Their last frost is sooner, and they'll get blooms sooner. So it's not according to your zone, it's according to your local conditions in your garden. So know that. Now, type 3 blooms on new wood. And that's where my Warsaw Nike kind of throws me off sometimes, because I think it blooms on old wood and new wood. So you'd think it'd be a type 2, but it's categorized as a type 3. That one I do, and a lot of times in late fall or in fall like this, I would just prune it back. Other times I wait till later in the winter to prune it back hard. I prune it back to about 8, 12 inches, and then it just grows and blooms like crazy. It's also the one that I had done where I did a pruning type where I left one cane growing tall. I pruned another one halfway back and another one close to the ground. And my attempt was to get lower blooms on the thing. That worked well. And if you want to do that, like you're afraid to do just one hard prune all at once, do it in increments that way and see what you get. You only know, like with my ones, my type 2 pruning that I have in the front, I didn't know they would rebloom so well if I gave them a hard prune right after they finished blooming in the summer and left them alone in the fall, because I used to just prune them back hard in the fall because I usually can't access them because of the snow in late winter, early spring. And so I always did things ahead of time. And yeah, that's the way I always did it. And I would get the one bloom. And then one year, I think deer came in and ate them off in the summer, and it grew back and bloomed again. And it was like a light bulb went off. And then I thought, okay, wow, I could get 2 blooms out of my clematis. Now, these are the ones in front of my front porch. And I also my bell of walking, which is on my side porch on the ground. So that's the ones that I have treated that way. Now, also my Warsaw Nike, if I cut it off after the first big bloom, it does regrow and rebloom that way. Also, if I just deadhead it, it will keep blooming. So that's why I sometimes I think it's a type 2, but it's listed as a type 3. So yeah, that's on the pruning. So that's 1, 2, or 3, or A, B, and C. That's how they're categorized, and that's how you prune them. So it's pretty simple. And the only reason I went back started just pruning the Warsaw Nike just hard, it just was easier. Some people find that with the type 2, they find it easier just to whack it back in late winter, and that's okay. That's okay. Everybody does it according to their own ideas. So that works. So, all right. So clematis, the climbing ones need a support structure. A trellis, an obelisk, an arbor, anything that you can wind them up. Now, you just start them and then they just take off and cling. There's some that don't have a mechanism to cling, and then you have to help them. And you have to be really careful because the stems can be really brittle and they break easy. And so you just want to be mindful of that. But most of them, that climb that you want to provide a structure for will just clamber right on up it. Sometimes I like to train them across like a trellis, and that way you get a lot more blooms because you're spreading them across the trellis. So, oh yeah, fence. I have one in the front growing along the fence, and I have the one with my Eden rose, which is Pearl de Jour, which is just gorgeous, the most magnificent bloomer. That is growing on the rose itself. And so that's another thing you can do, is have it grow up other plants. Okay, what did yeah, that's all about showcasing the blooms. All about that. Okay, 6, planting location. Now, here's another thing that I have discovered that most people will tell you to plant with the roots in the shade and the tops in the sun, or to do something to shade the roots. I found that not to be completely accurate for me. Some clematis are more susceptible to slug and snail damage and to a fungus that kills them back. And those ones, they need a lot of airflow. And so if you've got a bunch of stuff, mulch or whatever, around the root mass or on top of the roots, then they succumb easily to that. But if I have them out in an area where they get good airflow and there's no hiding place for the slugs and snails, they will grow just fine. I have two planted right next to each other. One is more susceptible to the wilt, and one is not as tough as nails. The first one will start growing just fine, and I think, oh wow, I'm going to get something from this year, and then all of a sudden it dies back. And it's the both of these together, they're planted with their roots in the shade, or it has been shaded. And so the other one will just keep on blooming and do fine all summer long. Now, the one that does fine is a Viticella type, which they are more hardy against the fungal infection. But the other one is a star-shaped one, and it is more susceptible. So I need to move it where it gets a lot more sun. And then maybe I'll get something from it. But it's supposed to be a nice scented one. Now, some clematis do have a scent. It's not strong, but if you have a lot of them, well, I shouldn't say not strong. There's certain, the type 1s, like the Montana group, they will have a strong scent. But I'm talking about the type 2 and 3s with the star shape. Some of those do have a scent. And this one I'm talking about that is susceptible to the wilt is one of them that has a scent. So now, that going to be said again, it does not have to have the roots in the shade and the tops in the sun. If you give them consistent moisture and you have it planted correctly, deep enough, you'll have no problem if it's planted in the sun. So the roots in the sun. So there's that. Okay. But the soil does have to be well drained to thrive. And that is just so true of so many plants, because if you have heavy clay soil, you want to loosen it up with amendments and organic amendments like mulch and compost, etc. And that will help to improve the drainage there. Because like anything else, if it sits in water or it's claggy, like clayey, then they'll develop root rot and just die. And that's because, they can't get oxygen. That's what clay soil or people who have really moist soil, that's the problem, is the roots drowned from the lack of oxygen. Okay, watering needs. Consistent moisture. That is, I don't mean constantly wet, but most people go by an inch a week of water. Unless you do pulse watering, it's a whole nother avenue there, which is really good, and it's good to explore, especially if you're in a drought-ridden area. Look up pulse, P-U-L-S-E, watering, and it's something that was brought back to life or developed down in Australia, the drought-ridden areas of Australia and New Zealand, I think, and it just is fascinating. It's very different than one drip in one area going deep. So I'm not going to go into it here, but anyway, so consistent moisture without drowning your plant is good. Let me see, what else does it say here? Be careful not to overwater. A good layer of mulch helps retain the moisture. Yes, that way you don't have to keep watering. Now, people I know are going to ask about fertilizing. What do I feed my clematis to get such beautiful blooms? I fertilize my roses because they are a hungry plant. Now, I used to not in the ground. I would only primarily focus on the ones in containers, but now I do also do the ones in the ground because I have planted heavily, thickly, with a lot of plants together. And a moment. That's my sister. It may go off again. So anyway, so I started fertilizing my roses with my Eco Organic, which is made from, it's a liquid fertilizer, it's a concentrate. It's made with food waste. And if you look up, I think I have a blog on it or a video. I'll link it, or anyways, if you go to their website, I'll link their website, and look up how much CO2 is created from the food waste going in the landfills, you might be surprised. And so I love that this product is made from it, and it works very, very well because it feeds not only plant, it feeds the soil too, and that's an important aspect. All right. So why I was saying that I feed my roses is because my clematis are usually planted next to my roses, they get the feed too. So that's what I feed them, and how I feed them, why I feed them, etc. Other parts of my garden I don't, where they're not planted next to things that get fertilized. But I do consistently mulch and compost, and therefore my soil is very nutritious, and I don't usually need to add extra fertilizers. Also, I have chickens, so you can know that's what I make my compost with, so that's high nutrition. Okay, disease resistance. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. Clematis wilt is real. I read a blog post and they said that it was not. There was no clematis wilt. There is, and it's even named. And so, anyways, so don't believe that guff. What she was saying was that what you see or find is these clematis were susceptible to snails and slugs, and that's what killed them back. That's not accurate. They are susceptible to slugs and snails, but they also can get a wilt. It's called clematis wilt. There's a name for this particular fungus or particular fungi, whichever ones that do it. Some are more susceptible to that than others. Many Viticella type clematis are very resistant, and if you go to the brushwood nurseries, again, their website, when you look at particular clematis, it'll tell you at the bottom if it's resistant to that fungus. I have a couple that are they'll start growing in spring and then they succumb every year. So it's something that I need to move them first to a sunnier spot, because they do have shaded roots and they obviously need more sun to help them combat that wilt or that fungus. So just if you are afraid of getting one that's susceptible, look on their site and then make sure you get ones that have more resistance to it, especially if you live in a humid area. So one thing you can do is keep the area at the ground free from debris. And that means even mulch. Mulch can even keep it moist around that. So it goes totally against what it says about mulching to keep the moisture in, but you've got to do what you got to do to get them to grow well and be resistant to something like that. You know what? I didn't try my rosemary oil, which fights fungi on them. Maybe I should try that next year. Okay, pest management. Slugs and snails, they love to munch on them, especially when they're first growing, and they can do a lot of damage. So just keep your population in check. What I do is I make beer traps with a tuna can or a cat food can, and I put it halfway with beer and I bury it to the soil level, where the top of the rim is at the soil level, and those little rascals will fill that puppy up and drown. They have a party first. They die happy. Okay. Extended bloom time. So like I said, the ones, my type 2s that I cut back after their first bloom, those ones I'm running out of battery, so I'm going to try to hurry up here. Those ones will give me 2 blooms. Some others just keep blooming like crazy, like my Bella walking, and my Warsaw Nike. They keep blooming, not as heavily as the first one, but they keep on blooming. And if I give them a light prune or deadhead, they keep blooming even more. Now, if you want to extend bloom times too, you can plant varieties that bloom in spring, then ones that bloom in summer, and then the ones that do late summer, and then you'll get a range. But there are some that bloom consistently from spring on through till fall. And again, Brushwood Nurseries has that on their website on any particular clematis that you have. Okay. Oh yeah, that one I was telling you about, Josephine, that one has a really long bloom time, and so does Chloe. So months of bloom. So look at those varieties. I really want to get a Josephine. The one I had died. I think it was gophers got to it. There was 2 or 3 in that bed, and the gophers killed them. Now I have HF Young back there where I had them, and they've left that one alone. Okay, so there is 11 essential things to know about growing clematis in your garden. And I have a couple of videos, and I'll link them in there on pruning, what I do for pruning. Also how I how I layer on the ground to propagate them. I show you how to propagate by cuttings, I think. If not, I'll get that post up. I've not been as successful with rooting cuttings as I have with the propagating by laying it on the ground and then pinning it down. And it's all in there, all the information that you would want to know. So now to my five favorite bloomers. I might have six, I don't know. I've talked a lot about Belle of Walking. That one has been a beautiful performer for me. Francisca Maria is beautiful, has done so well. I had one called Supernova, and it succumbed to something, I don't know what, but I'm going to get that one. That one bloomed a long, long time and is just gorgeous. So that's three. My Warsaw Nike, it puts on such a show, especially with the first bloom. That is wonderful. Pearl de Jour, that's the one I have growing up with my Eden Rose in the front on the arbor. I would like to get another one of that. I think that's pretty much most of them. I do have Sugar Sweet Lilac, and that dies back every year, and I think it's succumbing to the wilt, and I don't know why. The HF Young that I have in the back, it performs beautifully, but it just blooms the one time. I did try cutting it back, but I think I did it really late, so I'm going to try again next summer after its initial bloom, cut it back hard, and see if it reblooms for me. But it does grow very vigorously. And I'm looking around to see if I missed one. Nope, I think that's it. Oh, okay, so I've got more. The Ragucci and the Betty Corning, two of my favorites as well, because they bloom nonstop from the time they start all the way. And Ragucci just finished blooming, and this is the first week of November. So yeah, beautiful blooms. So those are my picks for my favorites, and I'm sure when I get more, I'll have more favorites, and I plan on getting more. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Come on back. I have been planting roses, and I'll share all about that then. So see you then. Bye.